Well, sad news last week with the passing of all-time great Roy Wright. Let's pay tribute to the champion, known affectionately around the place as the Gentle Giant.
Roy Wright was a late starter in football terms, first turning his hand to the game as a 16-year-old with North Kew in 1945. But such was his natural ability that he found himself at Punt Road just a year later. He hadn't yet come to terms with his huge frame and still lacked coordination and experience at the highest level, playing just 21 games in his first 4 years at the club, which was already blessed with champion Brownlow medalist Bill Morris as its #1 ruckman. Former teammate and curator of the Richmond Football Club Museum, Ron Reiffel.
Well, he was a ball player. He made a craft. I think he idolised Bill Morris, who was more or less keeping him out of the real #1 spot in the Richmond team. And Bill was a beautiful palmer of the ball, and Roy sort of adapted his game along the same lines, and he didn't use his weight as much as some people would have liked, but when he went through, he was still a hard man to stop because he was 16 stone and 6'2". You know, he was a pretty big man for that era.
With Morris's retirement at the end of 1951, Roy finally received the chance to grab a regular senior slot, having already tried 4 times to get a clearance to Hawthorn. Richmond coach Jack Dyer couldn't understand why a 16-stone mountain of a man with a 10-inch handspan didn't inflict more damage on the opposition. But that was Roy's gentlemanly way, and he soon became known throughout the football world as the Gentle Giant. Roy
was a gentleman. He treated everybody exactly the same, whether you're a third 18 player or a Jack Dyer. You know, he was very approachable and treated everybody the same. And I couldn't speak more highly of anybody.
Former teammate and eventual successor as #1 ruckman, Neville Crowe.
Oh, look, Roy was just one of those guys that played scrupulously fair football, and he worked on the theory, and I picked up on it myself because I was no tough guy. But at the end of the day, he said that, well, if he was getting the ball and guys were banging him and kicking him and doing all that sort of stuff, he felt that he was a much better chance to get the ball and do something with it, either in his palming or marking around the ground and playing. So bear in mind, he was certainly hard at the ball, but he wasn't the sort of guy that would go around punching and kicking and scratching or anything of that nature. But there was an incident, I think it's been fairly well recorded, but it bears going into. This was going back to my first year, 1957, maybe even the year before, 56, and he was playing on Skinny Martin, Brian Skinny Martin, Mick Martin's dad, who died only, about 3 weeks ago. Big Skinny was giving Roy a real working over, donging him and scraping him with the stops and the centre bounces and things like that, and Roy wasn't too happy about this, and Harry Beitzel was the umpire at the time, and I must confess, back in those days, umpires were men and not maggots, so he saw this happening to Roy, and after a goal was kicked, he said as they were running back to the centre, out of the corner of his mouth, "Roy, I'm giving you one shot." So the ball was bounced, Harry ran backwards, fell over, and Roy ran straight through Brian Martin, broke 3 of his ribs, and game over. So Gentle Giant sometimes.
Roy immediately blossomed once given the chance to play regular senior football, and quickly became the game's premier ruckman, winning the Brownlow medal in 1952 and again in 1954. He went on to win 4 club best and fairest, and represented Victoria on 18 occasions before a knee injury prematurely ended his career in 1959 after 195 games for his beloved Tigers.
To see Roy at full flight here with booming drop kicks or torpedo punts straight down the ground to Poulter, who was the centre half forward. This ground wasn't big enough for those 2 blokes. The 2 kicks from the back line, it was through the goals. And to see him work with Bill Wilson and later Ron Branton, it was really classic with his palming and his ability to move the ball to them. He just was terrific to watch.
Oh gosh, in my time of watching the Tigers, I had the good fortune of being a Richmond supporter before I was actually came down here to play, and my idol was Bill Morris, who wore #5, whose number I was very proud to receive later on. But I watched Roy evolve. Bear in mind, I was only a little kid at that time, and Roy's got a rank up there at 4 best and fairest and 2 Brownlow medals and 195 games. It doesn't get much better than that, given that he played quite a few, of course, in the reserves as he was trying to battle his way into the senior side. So he'd have to go down as one of the all-time greats, as his presence in the Team of the Century and, of course, the Hall of Fame honour that he received as well. So he's right up there in the top guys in the club over its history.
Roy was an inaugural inductee to both the AFL and Richmond Halls of Fame, and unquestionably one of the greatest to ever pull on the yellow and black. Roy Wright, forever remembered as a true gentleman, the great gentle giant.